Everyone, and welcome to today's session. And in this workshop, we will examine the nature of qualitative data analysis. And at the end of this workshop, you should be able to identify the main issues that you need to consider when preparing a qualitative data for analysis. You should be able to also demonstrate knowledge of the elements and approaches to qualitative data analysis. And at the end of the session, again, you should understand what thematic analysis means and the set of criteriology involved in achieving a good analysis. So that takes us to our first question. What do we understand by the term analysis? What does analysis mean to you? Now, to analyze means to discover or to reveal something through a closer examination. It means to study or examine something in detail in order to discover more about it. Analysis, of course, must be supported by empirical evidence or by facts or strong explanations, good reasons, well-considered evidence. In fact, analysis is the basis of every understanding, right? And when a researcher sets out to examine something, right, the idea is you must be able to separate it into parts such that you actually see how everything forms together. And that takes us to our second question, right? What is qualitative data analysis? What does qualitative data analysis mean to you? Now, qualitative data analysis is defined as the process of systematically searching and arranging the interview transcripts, observation notes, and other non-textual materials such that you as a researcher, you are able to accumulate or increase your understanding of a phenomenon. Qualitative data analysis helps you to identify patterns within data. It also helps you to compare and contrast findings within a particular data set. Right? Qualitative data is rich in its approach so that it helps you identify themes and also helps you to develop theory for your data. I think in a nutshell, a very good and apt definition of qualitative data analysis is your ability to identify all non-numeric data that have not been quantified and that can be a product of your research strategy. So in essence, a qualitative data analysis is defined as a process of systematically searching and arranging the transcript from your interviews, your notes from your observations, and other non-textual materials that can help you understand a phenomenon in detail. So in trying to dissect that construct in a very rich format, right? I've been able to identify some good definitions that kind of provide some rich definitions of what qualitative data analysis is. And I like this definition from Keegan, which actually points out or which reports that qualitative data analysis is a process of sorting data, right? This includes transcripts from your interviews, from pictures, from diaries, and your ability to look for themes within those data sets, right? It provides an opportunity to fill in the gaps, right? Whereby you are able to make links and observe patterns and, of course, create that overarching working models or theories. Another apt or opposite definition by Coffey and Atkinson puts qualitative data analysis as a pervasive activity, right, throughout the life of a research project, right? And it's not simply one of the latest stages of research, right? It includes an iterative process whereby you are trying to systematically search and arrange findings towards understanding a phenomenon in detail. Now, qualitative research includes the following, right? It includes emotions, right? This is your subjective state of mind. It includes your ability to make the right judgments. It includes your ability to also draw from your past experience, right? your ability to identify connections and patterns within your data sets. It involves filling in the gaps in your research, right? It also involves identifying patterns, identifying trends within your data set. But of course, the overall goal is to bring all these patterns together towards identifying a coherent set of findings or evidence. Now, I think at this point it's quite important to compare and contrast, right, the difference between qualitative data analysis and quantitative data analysis. And what you get across a number of texts is that many authors have, of course, drawn that distinction between qualitative and quantitative research. And I think when we look at quantitative data, right, or quantitative data, right, we are able to draw, or let's start with qualitative first. So when we look at qualitative data, right, we're able to draw some kind of significant distinctions, right, from those that result from a quantitative work. Now, qualitative data are associated with meanings which are characterized by their richness and fullness based on you, the researcher's opportunity to explore a subject in as real a manner as is possible. Now, I think a distinction can actually be made between the theme abstraction or description that results from a quantitative data collection or the thick and robust or thorough abstraction or description associated with qualitative data. So what you find with qualitative data is that it's based on meanings, and these meanings are expressed through words. It involves collection of results in a non-standardized data which requires classifications into codes or categories, right? And it involves analysis conducted through the use of conceptualizations. Now, on the other hand, for quantitative data, you realize it is based on meanings derived from statistical analysis, from numbers, from experimentation. It involves the collection of results in standardized or numerical formats. And of course, it involves analysis conducted through the use of diagrams and statistics. So it takes us to another question. How do I analyze, right? What are the steps for analysis for interview data? Right, so I think immediately, of course, I think the first stage is, of course, you conduct the interviews and you try to produce transcripts for the recorded interviews. Then you proceed to create some kind of summaries of the data and note the key quotes or the key responses from your participants. Then you try to bring these summaries together with the knowledge of the studies you've read, literature you've read. Then you start to now proceed to select these interviews and categorize them into themes. Another good approach is to ensure that you are arranging or rearranging your data into this categorization so that you are producing new themes, and I'll explain about themes as we go on, right? And of course, your interviews can be interpreted by considering your data more extensively in order to uncover the deeper and richer findings of your data. And then you try to link these ideas and emergent theories to the past literature. I think with this, you are able to provide some kind of a rich understanding of what you've identified in your data set. Now, I think, again, across a number of text research methods textbook, and when you speak to a lot of methodologists, right, you realize that there exists a plethora of approaches to qualitative data analysis, right? And these are categorized under 5 key elements. And I think across these 5 key elements, there seems to be some kind of consensus or consensual agreement, right, that these are the key elements of qualitative data analysis. And this includes transcription and familiarization of data, right, categorization, right, unitization of data, recognizing the relationships and developing categories, and of course, generating themes. Right, so we'll quickly run through these key elements and see what they mean so that we can actually have a richer understanding of the meanings of these constructs. So transcription, transcribing qualitative data, I think this involves listening to an audio file and putting down what was said in writing. Transcription involves reproducing actual words as a written or word processed account. I think one of the difficult aspects of transcriptions is that it is likely to be time consuming, right? It is likely to be time consuming. In fact, it takes about 6 to 10 hours to transcribe an hour's worth of interviews, right? So it is likely to be very consuming, as of course you need not only to record exactly what was said and by whom, but also to try to give an indication of the participants' non-verbal communication, right? Transcription, right? You note the non-verbal communications, right? And of course, a key element of transcriptions is that there must be that element of accuracy, right? It must be accurate. So there must be that data cleaning by ensuring that you correct any errors. And one of the challenges or weaknesses you see across young researchers and students is that they often forget to anonymize their transcription. So you must be able to provide some kind of confidentiality by saving your transcribed files using anonymous names. So now there are also alternatives, because we do realize that transcriptions can be time consuming, right? So sometimes you find students, they pay people, right, to transcribe their audio recordings. But of course, this is expensive. And one of the challenges with this is that you are unable to familiarize yourself with the data, right? I've also seen where students also use a number of softwares, and sometimes you've got to be very careful because the softwares may not be able to transcribe accurately the key elements of your data set, right? Students also do dictation, but the challenge with dictation is that you always have to go back to ensure that accuracy. So the accuracy is always very, very key, very important. So this means that there must be that data cleaning, right, to ensure that your transcription is accurate and that you are able to correct any errors. Now, the next stage is the categorization, right? And another word for categorization can be coding, right? So coding or categorization of data is actually the most important stage in qualitative data analysis. Coding or categorization merely involves subdividing the huge amount of raw data and assigning them into categories. Now, qualitative data involves classifying that data into meaningful categories. That's what it means, right? And these categories are in effect codes or labels used to group your data. Now, this provides you with an emergent structure relevant to your research and helps you analyze your data further. Right? I think it's also good at this juncture to point out that categories or codes are guided by the purpose of your research, and it's guided by the purpose of your objectives. So on your part, you need to be able to devise a coherent set so that they provide you with a well-structured analytical framework that helps you pursue your analysis. But of course, you know that these codes actually are emergent from your data. So if you can see that example there, kind of helps you with the labeling so that you are able to provide short codes that helps you pursue your analysis. So the next is unitization, right? And this is part of the analytical process whereby you try to attach relevant bits or chunks of your data, right, which we will refer to as codes of data, to the appropriate categories, right? So you're attaching relevant bits or chunks of your data, right, to the appropriate categories that you've devised. Now, a part of data or a unit of data, right, can be a line of words, it can be a line of your transcript, it can be a sentence, can be a number of sentences, could be some chunk of textual data. For instance, if you look at the example here, right, you've got job satisfaction, and under it you have supervision, pay, job security. So what you're trying to do here is you're attaching relevant bits or chunks of data, right, to the appropriate categories that you've devised, right? So here, what you do is you can actually label a unit of data with the appropriate category. So for instance, you have a card, right? And if you're doing this manually, right, what you're trying to do is that in this stage, you are engaging a selective process. And this selective process is guided by the purpose of your research. And the goal is to help you reduce and rearrange your data into a manageable, comprehensive form. Now, the next stage is recognizing relationships, right? And the idea of recognizing relationships is that you're trying to search for themes and patterns, right, in relationship to your rearranged data, right? And the goal of this part is to ensure that the data you are identifying makes sense, that there's a relationship, right? And if there's no relationship, if it doesn't really make sense, then what it means is that you have to take away some of those themes. So by recognizing relationship means that one is able to gain new insight within the existing categories, right? So you may subdivide or integrate categories as ways of refining or refocusing your analysis, right? So the idea is, as you search for key themes or patterns, you try to look for those relationships and this will actually help you reduce and rearrange your data in a more comprehensive format. So this is an example, right? So you've identified some of the quotes, right? What you're trying to do now is try to look for the relationship between those quotes. You are looking forward, right? Ability to connect, influence, perspective, challenging, negative, past experience. So you're trying to look at the relationship between these quotes, right? And you're trying to, through these relationships, you're trying to gain more insight and see how you can actually reduce and rearrange your data, and you're able to identify some richer comprehension of your data set. Now, I think that being said, it's quite important to quickly run through that there are other approaches, right, to qualitative data analysis, right? And you've got content analysis, you've got thematic analysis, you've got grounded theory, you've got narrative analysis, conversation analysis, and discourse analysis. Now, the previous steps I actually gave you was a kind of generic summary of how data analysis works, and this is actually drawn from some of the discourse you find in a lot of methodological text. But of course, specifically, there are other approaches to qualitative data analysis, right? So if you look at content analysis, and the goal of content analysis is that it is seen as a method of summarizing any form of content, right, by counting various aspects of the content. Now, content analysis is used to identify patterns across qualitative data, and sometimes it is treated similar as the thematic approach or thematic analysis. Now, thematic analysis, which is usually a favorite, and I think it's actually the best for students, young researchers, because the truth is most analyses actually involve some kind of thematic analysis. And I think for the purpose of this course, we will focus on thematic analysis because it is clearer, it is easier, and it provides you with a strong foundation for understanding analysis. Right, so thematic analysis, a good paper is that done by Brown and Clark, and they define thematic analysis as a method of analyzing and identifying themes, right? And these themes are able to capture important aspects in relation to the research question. Right, so the next is grounded theory, and grounded theory is involves the collection and analysis of data. Right, here the analysis and development of theories happens after you've collected the data. So grounded theory is a structured process, and it comprises open coding, right, whereby you disaggregate the codes or the data into units. Axial coding, whereby you kind of recognize the relationships between the categories, and selective coding, whereby you kind of integrate these categories towards producing a theory. Then we have narrative analysis. Here you're trying to capture the experiences of respondents or participants, and you use these responses or these experiences or narratives to kind of explain contradictions and complexities of real-world scenarios. Then we've got conversation analysis, right? And with conversation analysis, you are interested in the elements of social interactions, right? You are trying to examine rich aspects of people's conversations, the interruptions, the distributions of speaking rights, and you are trying to uh, provide a richer capture of what the participants are all about. Then finally, discourse analysis, right? This is whereby you are giving structure to a language and you're trying to emphasize how the participants' events or narratives of events are structured, right? I think the idea of discourse analysis, it focuses on recognizing regularities in languages in terms of patterns. So, because of time, we won't be able to examine all of them, but I think for the purpose of this course, we will delve very much into thematic analysis and try to understand what the thematic analysis as a construct means and what are the key steps for thematic analysis. So the question now is, what does thematic analysis mean, right? If someone asks you, what does thematic analysis mean? How would you articulate it? Now, thematic analysis, and I think drawing from this definition of Brown and Clark in 2006, they define thematic analysis as a method of identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns or themes within a data. Now, thematic analysis minimally organizes and describes data sets in rich detail, right? And I think it's quite important to identify at this point that thematic analysis differs from the other analytical methods that seek to describe patterns across qualitative data. Because in some sense, and in real sense, most of the other approaches are really thematic in approach. And one of the key strengths of thematic analysis is its flexibility. Because in being flexible, you as a researcher, you are able to move between the data sets, right? There's that constant iteration between the whole data set, right? Between the extracts of coded data and analyzed data. So just to repeat the definition again, thematic analysis is a method of identifying and analyzing and reporting patterns within a data set. But of course, it goes further so that you are able to interpret rich aspects of that research topic towards uncovering robust findings or robust interpretations. Now, what counts as a theme, right? What actually counts as a theme, right? So themes are actually patterns within a data, right? Themes are patterns within the data, and they can be identified in one or two primary ways. It can be done through bottom-up, that's an inductive way, or top-down in a deductive way. And a theme, again, right, it captures something important about the data. So a theme captures something about the data, right? And it represents some level of pattern responses or meanings within a data set. So in this case, the themes you identify, code, and analyze should be an accurate reflection of the entire data set. It should be an accurate reflection of the entire data set. I think it's at this point, it's quite important to clarify the difference between a code and a theme, right? A code and a theme. So for coding, in qualitative research, coding is how you define what the data you are analyzing is all about, right? And coding is a process of identifying a passage in a text or in other data items. Coding involves searching and identifying concepts and finding relationships between them. It's also called categorization. Now, it's good to understand that coding, of course, is not just labeling. It is the linking of data to the research idea and back to the other data. In fact, coding kind of enables you to organize data so that you can examine and analyze them in a structured way. So what you get is that the code is some kind of in a code in qualitative inquiry is most often a word or a short phrase. So let me give you an example. So for instance, look at it. Let's listen to this narrative. So the closer I get to retirement age, the faster I want it to happen. Now, I'm not even 50 yet, and I would give anything to retire soon. But I have a mortgage and I still have a lot of savings to put away, right? And sometimes I even end up playing the lottery, and the lottery does not help, right? And I'm hoping the lottery might help. But somehow I'm really worried. I am really, really worried. So from that excerpt, what you can actually get that the narrative is all about is about retirement, about age, about financial obligations, about dreams of early retirement. So those are the kind of codes, right? And if I was going to produce a final code from those codes, the two key codes I will identify from there will be retirement and anxiety. Retirement and anxiety. Now, the coding process helps you to identify themes within the accounts. The coding process helps you to identify themes within the accounts. So themes, again, like I said, are patterns within a data set that can be identified in one or two primary ways, right? And themes are features of a participant's accounts, characterizing particular perceptions, particular experiences that you, the researcher, see as relevant. So themes don't actually hide in the data, right, waiting to be discovered. Rather, themes arise from your engagement, right, with the text, right? So themes, right, so themes actually emerge, right? They are the features of the participant's accounts, right? So if someone asks you what is the difference between a code and a theme, codes are shorter, more succinct words, while themes are expressed in longer phrases or longer sentences. So this is just a quick snapshot. I'll quickly move from this, right? This is data extract coded for this, right? So it kind of shows the entire relationships. So let me quickly move on. So Brown and Clark also identified five key steps for thematic analysis. Remember, we said thematic analysis is a method of identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns within a data set, right? And the idea is to be able to uncover rich and robust findings within your data set. Now, Brown and Clark identified 5 steps, right? Or 6 steps, sorry. And these 6 steps are your ability to familiarize yourself with data, your ability to generate initial codes, your ability to search for themes, review themes, define and name these themes, and produce a compelling report, right? Produce a compelling report. So let's look at some of these in detail, right? Let's look at some of these in detail. So in terms of familiarizing yourself with data, I think for you as a researcher, right, engaging in analysis means that you are kind of familiarizing yourself with the data collected. And you can only do this through transcription. Now, the challenge of giving someone else to transcribe for you is that it provides you with an opportunity, it provides you with that chance of not immersing yourself in that data. So I think it's usually better when you collect your data yourself and you do your transcription yourself. Because as a good researcher, right, it is vital you immerse yourself in the data set so that you are familiar with the depth and breadth of the content. Now, immersion usually involves repeatedly reading the data and reading the data in an active way so that you're actually searching for meanings and patterns and so on. Now, the next stage is generation of codes, right? And this is where you have read and familiarized yourself with data. Then you proceed to generate an initial list of ideas about what is in the data and what is actually interesting about them. Now, the next stage is the searching for themes. This is where you're kind of collating codes into themes. And it begins when all the data have been initially coded and collated. All the data that you've coded have been identified across your data set. Now, this stage involves sorting the different codes into potential themes and collating all those relevant coded data extracts within the identified themes. Now, the next stage is reviewing themes, right? This is where you are kind of cross-checking to ensure that the themes fit the coded extracts, right? And this stage begins when you've devised a set of themes, usually we call them kind of candidate themes, and involves a refinement of those themes. Here, you will need to read the extracts of each of those themes and consider if they make meanings or they have any kind of coherent patterns within them. Then you now define and name the themes. So you need to be able to analyze the themes and generate stories, right, to describe the themes, right? So you generate some kind of stories, and this is done by naming those themes. So you give those names, you give those themes particular names, right? So once you've reviewed and refined the themes, it is vital that you name the themes, and the names need to be concise, they need to be punchy, and so that it immediately gives the reader a sense of what you're talking about. Now, the final phase is producing the reports. I think this is one of the most important phases. Here, this involves the task of writing up your report. So you want to tell us how you are able to familiarize yourself with data, how you're able to generate codes, how you're able to search for themes, review the themes, define and name the themes. So producing the report involves the task of writing up the report. So here, you're writing up the report, right? And the task of writing up the report is your explanation, right, of your narrative. So here you're trying to convince the examiner, you're trying to convince the reader about the validity of your analysis. I think it is important that the analysis or the report you're providing provides a concise or coherent or logical narrative, right? And remember, it must be non-repetitive, right? But it must be interesting. You must be able to provide an interesting account of the story that the data tells within and across the themes. So this means that your write-up must provide sufficient evidence of themes within your data. So I like this 15-point checklist, right, identified by Brown and Clark, right? They point out that if you are able to fulfill this 15-point checklist, then you've actually produced a good thematic analysis, right? By transcribing, right, to ensure that your data has been transcribed, given the appropriate level of detail, and the transcriptions have been checked for accuracy, right? Coding, ensure that each data has been given equal attention in the coding process, right? Ensure that the themes have not been generated from some kind of examples, but instead the coding has been thorough, inclusive, and comprehensive. I really like that. Ensure that extracts for all themes have been collated. The themes have been checked against each other. The themes are coherent, right? They make sense. There's consistency, right? Ensure that there's that interpretation, right? Ensure that the analysis matches each other. Ensure there's a good analysis, a good balance between the narrative forms, right? Ensure that enough time has been allocated to all the phases, right? You don't want a scenario whereby you're jumping from phase 1 to phase 3 without undertaking phase 2. So you must follow the phases in a very sequential format. Ensure your report is clear, right? There's a good fit between what you're claiming to do. Provide a rich narrative, right? And ensure that the language and concepts are clear and consistent. And of course, ensure that you as a researcher, you are positioned in an active research process, right? And that the themes do not just emerge. So go through these 15 points. It's quite important to understand these 15 key points. They kind of help you produce a good thematic report. So this is an example of one thematic set of analysis I've done for one of my old research, right? So here I was able to identify themes, right? So the themes identified, remember your themes are expressed in longer phases, like, so my themes is entrepreneurial perception of formal institutions, right? Now, within those themes, I also have sub-themes. So what are the positive perceptions, right? What are the positive perceptions of those institutions and what are the negative perceptions, right? And remember, we spoke about describing those themes, right? Or naming those themes, right? So in describing those themes, I'm saying, yes, the respondents have a positive perception of formal institutions, right? And in the negative part, I'm saying, well, the respondents do not have a favorable perception of formal institutions. Now, in further describing it, I'm now assigning some typical quotes. So for the positive part of the positive perception, there was no quotes. So what this means is across my data set, across the participants, they didn't have any positive perception about institutions, right? However, right, there were lots of negative quotes about institutions. So they say, no, the courts are expensive, right? It is for rich people. It involves a lot of money. Here you'll be charged lots of money, which is not necessary, right? So here there's a negative perception. Now, if you come to the last column, you say saliency. This is how many times these features. So in terms of the positive element, there was a low feature, there was a low saliency, but in terms of negative perception, there was a high rate of response across participants. So this kind of one sample table I always like to use. Very good, kind of helps you in producing your thematic analysis or in writing up your reports. So we just quickly round up with validity. I think it's also good to understand that thematic analysis, your analysis must be valid, right? And validity is concerned with if your findings are really about what they appear to be all about, right? And some of the strategies to enhance validity is ensure that you record precisely, right? And provide detailed descriptions from your analysis, right? Use tape recorders, right? It's very difficult to go for an interview without an audio recorder. It's quite difficult, right? Sometimes you check in formally with the participants for accuracy during the process of data collection, right? And you can also ask the participant to review the synthesis, right? Or check for accuracy or representation, right? You can also search for, record, and analyze negative cases of discrepancies within your data, right? And ensure that there's a match between findings and reality, right? So these are the strategies, right? Prolonged persistent field work, right? Low inference descriptors. You can use multiple researchers if you're an advanced researcher, but being a student, you can't use multiple researchers, right? Member check-in, participant review, so these are some of the strategies you can use to enhance the validity of your analysis. In terms of reliability, right, you also want to uncover how reliable your research is, and reliability refers to the extent in which your data collection techniques or your analysis procedures will yield rich, robust, and consistent findings, right? And in terms of reliability, right, some of the questions you want to ask is, will my results yield the same? Will my analysis yield the same results, right? Is there transparency, right? And how was this transparency uncovered within my data sets? So some of the ways in which we can actually, and I think one of the biggest challenges with analysis is that element of bias, right? And how do you reduce bias, right? Some of the strategies you can use are reflexivity, whereby you are undertaking that self-introspection, right? You're probing yourself and asking yourselves about your conclusions and if you have followed the right protocols, right? There's an approach called bracketing. Bracketing is whereby after your analysis, you send the findings back to the participants to kind of corroborate and ask them by saying, sir, are these meanings what you meant when you said this, right? So it's more like fact checking with the participants. So it's called bracketing. Another one is data triangulation, right? Which involves time triangulation, data gathered over time. Space triangulation, data gathered over different multiple sites. You're going to different locations to see if some of these findings are unique, right? Person triangulation, data gathered at multiple levels, right? Then you've got investigator triangulation, when you use more than one multiple observer or one researcher, and methodological triangulation, whereby you're using a mixed method, qualitative or quantitative approaches. So, quick summary, right? We've come to learn that codes are shorter, more succinct, where themes are expressed in longer phrases. We've also come to realize that the main focus of qualitative analysis is to understand the way people act and the accounts given within their narratives or within their interpretations, right? To also understand that validity is important within data analysis, and reliability is also very important within within qualitative data analysis. We've also realized that the distinction can be made between the thin and abstract or descriptive nature of quantitative research or the thick and thorough nature of qualitative research. Right, so these are kind of the key things we've learned today. Right, we've also learned that thematic analysis is a process of identifying meanings and patterns and trends within a given data set towards uncovering rich and robust findings within your data set. Now, I've put these additional slides, right, and I've put a set of links. Now, this set of links kind of provides us with an understanding of how to use the NVivo, which is a powerful software for data analysis, right? And it's been designed for qualitative researchers, and it works very well with your transcribed data, right, or small or large amount of data. And for us, for you being a student, and also for staff, you can download NVivo via this link there, right? I've also put up some additional links, right, that we can actually use for to kind of understand how to code, how to get started with the NVivo software, an overview of the NVivo, how to analyze using NVivo, coding within the NVivo, how to manage nodes, and how to import within the NVivo. So in your spare time, it's quite good. It's a good practice to go through them. This would definitely help you understand how to navigate the NVivo system, and of course, it will be relevant during your dissertation process in your final year. So these are references. Thank you, and have a lovely day.